Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markowitz, and today we're getting an update on Goliath Resources, traded on the TSX.V under the ticker GOT, and on the OTCQB under the ticker GOTRF. And I'm joined today with the founder and CEO of Goliath Resources, Roger Rosmus. And Roger, great to get you on the show to talk about a press release that you put out to the market on December 12th highlighting a Bonanza grade hole. This is at your Bonanza Zone in the Surebet Discovery. Headline hole, 226 grams per ton gold over 1 meter. That's really 7 ounces, over 7 ounces of gold equivalent. And then there's also a section in there almost 6 meters long, 5.95 meters, averaging 45 grams per ton gold, that high grade section within there. So I want to dig into this particular hole, what you take away from it in the overall context of the drilling your team has done over the last couple seasons. Tell us what you think some of the key takeaways you want the market to know about this Bonanza grade hole in the Bonanza Zone.
Hey, Shad. Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, it's I think really important and exciting that the hole 249 hit such a significant amount of gold, considering it's almost 500 from a hole we drilled last year, hole GD 23197 that ran true width almost 9 meters, and that was over 1 ounce material as well. So folks might recall this area initially was sort of like a triangle shaped zone. Now it's with this intercept, we're looking more like a polygon, which is quite large at the moment that we've delineated. It's 612 meters by 835 meters by 685 meters by 410 meters. So put that in perspective. If this area, let's say, averages, call it 5 meters, we're looking at anywhere between close to 5 million tons of material or 5 million tons of rock. If it, let's say, averages 7 meters, that means it's potentially be 7 million tons of rock. And then, whatever the grade might be, it'll be. But we're super excited. We've got 13 more holes. Assays are pending from this. Should also mention the hole 260 we drilled this year. That was the most abundant visible gold that we have drilled to date. Also GD 22100, which is we drilled that in 2022. From the same area, and that ran essentially 6 meters, and that was a 0.8 ounce per ton gold equivalent as well. And that's about 250 meters, 300 meters to the south of hole 197. So really looking forward to announcing the rest of these results. Hole 272 and 273 were the big step outs to the northwest and northeast. Should mention when we're drilling these holes, we're hitting the Bonanza high grade zone, plus or minus 5 meters. So, that tells us there's a very predictable, robust, and clearly there's continuity on this part of the shear zones that we've discovered here at Surebet.
Well, and Roger, when you say you have 13 more holes going into this area, you still have 101 holes to release from this exploration program, just for clarity for people listening. But those 13 holes intersect that Bonanza zone. I guess some people are having a hard time tying all together these different lenses, because I think you have on your site about 10 different lenses here stacked together. And so people remember the Surebet, they're hearing the Bonanza. We've talked Golden Gate, we've talked Mothership Feeder Zone, we've talked about the Deep Zone, there's Goldzilla, there's all kinds of stuff going on. I guess simplify the idea for people that when you're going through this, you may hit multiple different zones of action here on the way down. Just kind of clarify that point for people.
That's correct. So, the benefit of this being stacked series of veins, essentially, like I think Quentin likes to call it baklava, with all your nuts and things in between the various zones. But depending on where we're drilling from on the hill, on the mountainside, we can hit multiple zones on the way through. At the same time, keep in mind that even the Bonanza vein is 150 meters above the valley floor. So when folks are looking at, the depths of where we intercept Bonanza, it doesn't necessarily mean it's, 600 meters or 500 meters below the surface. Bonanza is 150 meters above the valley floor. As an example, our hole 249, we hit it very shallow. It was, I believe it was like around 70 meters or so down hole. So, to the point, it's every time we drill, we're able to get extra data points on the other zones. So it's just not we're going after one part of the vein, we're hitting multiple veins, which, will also help eventually when we do put a maiden resource together at some point down the road.
Well, and Roger, there was a little feedback on this hole that you just released, this hole 249, saying that, hey, most of the grade was contained in that 1 meter. And was there grade smearing going on because you tried to include it over 6 meters? And you were mentioning to me off mic that, this hole started mineralization and it ended in some of that high grade. But there's a lot of mineralization that you'd want to include in this. So maybe talk about how the grade was distributed in this hole 249.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, bottom line is the whole, again, I don't have the raw data in front of me, but I recall that I think the first meter was like over an ounce or close to an ounce material, and then going to like a 5.5 grammer, some anomalous gold, and, ending in that super hot piece of, 7 ounce type of material. So as a miner, you're going to go in and mine the entire bit. You're not going to leave 1 ounce material behind or the 6 gram material or 5.5 gram material behind. So ultimately, smearing, I'd say if we were like trying to move this thing over like 9 meters of whatever with anomalous gold, then yeah. But we started in high grade mineralization, we ended in high grade mineralization. So you're gonna go after the entire 6 meters.
I'm glad you clarified that. Yeah, so there's a lot of goodies in there, and you want to go after the whole enchilada or all the baklava. Now, when you put out this press release, you also mentioned that there's these newly discovered porphyritic dykes, and this is important because these dykes could indicate, where the feeding system is to this whole thing. And so there's this reduced intrusion related gold, very similar to something like what Snowline has. And you've mentioned in some of these other holes, like the Mothership Feeder Zone, or even this kind of material you're seeing over at Blue Origin, you're starting to see a lot more of this reduced intrusion related gold, where it's got the moly and it's got the bismuth along with it as pathfinder elements. Maybe speak a little bit about how that's tying together into an interesting interpretation for the geological team.
Yeah, Chad, good question on the porphyritic dikes that we're seeing. Very important. The whole bit here of finding visible gold, moly, bismuth in this porphyritic dikes throughout the area here. Just from, really trying to get peel back the onion to understand what brought all this mineralization that filled in these, 10 other veins that we've discovered to date, plus obviously the 4 lenses we're seeing below the valley floor. The fact that we're seeing visible gold in the dikes tells us, is obviously, it confirms to us anyhow our opinion that it's a very telltale that the big heat engine that carried all this mineralization to the various veins that we've drilled in to date. So we've got quite a few of those holes or assays pending as well. We did reassay 17 holes from 2021 to 2023. So 17 holes that equated to about 850 samples, 1 meter samples. So looking forward to seeing that. And, again, if all these dikes are mineralized, it could add, I guess, additional tonnage to maiden resource scenario like hole 237 we just announced. I mean, that was like 5 meters of 14.5 grams per ton gold equivalent, which is pretty substantial.
Well, and it just shows that there's two different mineralized systems coming together here. You have all of these stacked lenses, and then you have this reduced intrusion mineralization, adding another layer of complexity. And in this case, complexity is good. I guess just remind us, Roger, that in addition to this Surebet Discovery area, you also have a lot of holes into some of these other targets. And we don't want to complicate the story too much, but it's important to note that you have targets like the Jackpot area that have some holes going into them, as well as some other discovery holes. So maybe just talk about, out of the balance of the 101 holes still to report, how you're going to put out kind of chunks of data on different areas.
Actually, Chad, great question. So the idea is we want to string a number of holes together, let's say a half a dozen to a dozen per vein. So when we do announce, then people can put that into context as to what that means. As an example, Treasure Island, 40 kilometers to the north, roughly, of Surebet, we drilled 12 holes. Hit some pretty interesting looking mineralization there. We'll announce all 12 of those holes at once. When we get that back from the lab, who the heck knows? As far as Jackpot, which is a really high grade area, I think we had a sample that ran over 21.5 ounces per ton gold equivalent. We drilled, I think it was about half a dozen holes. We'll announce all half a dozen holes at the same time. Again, just trying to put some context as to what the drill holes mean.
Well, and one other thing just to make as a general statement is that with 92% of the holes showing visible gold, compare that to what your team saw last year, And I guess I would have to say, or anybody watching this would have to say, your geological team, the exploration team, has dialed it in. They've found a way to hit in almost every hole. So just talk about the number of holes that actually hit pay dirt. I mean, you don't have the assays yet, but you can tell there's mineralization in these holes.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we see galena, sphalerite, and again, visible gold. What's the best thing to find when you're drilling is VG in the core. So that, indicates that we should, what probability suggests we should have decent results. And, so far, I don't think we haven't disappointed. We have delivered. Like, as an example, hole 235 that we announced earlier this year, 5.25 meters, over an ounce. And then, again, hitting this, plus or minus 5 meters, it's pretty predictable. But of the 101 holes, we drilled 64 holes this year. So of that batch, we've got 60 holes coming back. So let's kind of do the math here. So 92% of the 64 holes had visible gold. We've announced four. I think they've delivered the goods. And then the other holes that we talk about are the ones from up north at the Treasure Island. And then we had the 17 holes relogging of this porphyritic dike, intrusive style, reduce intrusive mineralization. And then we had 17 holes that we essentially had to go back and take a look at the shoulders. We think we may have left some gold in the cores there. So that's being relogged. They were relogged, now being assayed to potentially, increase some of the intercepts and grades from the previous years.
Well, and Roger, with all of this drilling that you've done, when you release all 101 holes over the next couple of months, do you think that this is something where you want to start trying to work on a resource? I see a lot of people asking questions about that, but it seems like you've got so many different areas you're drilling, and you would probably have to tighten up some of the drill spacing just based on these step outs that I don't think it's at the stage where you want to put out a resource, but I don't want to take words and put them in your mouth. How are you looking at the odds of doing a resource after all this drilling?
Yeah, I get that question a bit, and it's a simple answer is the more we drill, the bigger this gets. So we don't know how big it is yet, which is a great question not to have the answer to because in most of these scenarios of new discovery, it starts out really, really big, and the more you drill it, the smaller it gets. Guess what? The more we drill here at the Surebet Discovery, the bigger it gets. I should mention, everything remains wide open. So even to the north west here, I'm just looking at an image of the high-grade Bonanza Zone here, which is currently a polygon, 340,000 square meters. Essentially we increase that size by, delineate it by, increase of 180%. And it does remain open to the northwest, to the west. So, we're just going to continue drilling and, we'll get to a point where, maybe we stop finding new stuff and we'll, have to start do infill. And as you know, for any kind of resource, you're looking at kind of 75 meter to 50 meter spacing. That's going to take some time.
Well, let's also remind people, just as we wrap up here, of the financial health of the company. You've done a capital raise where you brought in some key strategic shareholders. Rob McEwen topped up his position. Crescat topped up their position. Larry Childress came in. Some other high net worth investors. You brought in a strategic fund out of Asia. So you've got the cash flow to keep this party going and keep the drilling going into next year. Maybe just speak to the financial health of the company and how you're already set up to kick off 2025.
Yeah, we, was able to raise, I guess, just over $22.6 million this year, pay for an upsized drill program. But with that, we're going to have a very healthy balance sheet going into 2025. Mentioning some of the people of note last week, we had some pretty good volume. I know the Singapore group actually have increased their size. They told me they bought actually over another 2 million plus shares in the market last week. So that puts them actually about a 5.2% holding of the company, which is great. So it's in good sticky hands, which is great to have when you have these kind of people on your share register. But yeah, going into 2025, we don't, there's no financing risk hanging over our heads. I do have $9.5 million of warrants that are deep in the money. Average strike of 62 cents. We're currently trading around $1.05, $1.08 thereabouts, plus or minus. And all these warrants expire in 2025. Kind of Q1, one third, Q2, one third, and then the balance is in Q4. So I would expect to see that money rolling in, which again will be helpful for our 2025 drill program.
All right, Roger. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there for the day because I know we'll be talking a lot over the next couple of months with all these different areas, different veins, and all the data comes back from the labs. I think it's been a long wait for some people, but I think the few holes that you have put out have showed just how much promise there is at the Bonanza and the Surebet Discovery, and we've got a lot more holes to come. So for those listening in, if you want to follow along with the news flow from Goliath, definitely click on the link below this interview. Takes you over right to the website, straight to their news section, so you too can follow along or sign up for email updates on the news as it breaks. Roger, keep us posted as more assays come back in. We'll get you back on for another update. And as always, looking forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Shad. Thanks for having me again, and happy holidays to you and the family and all the listeners out there.